And this is why people vote for Trump. They say in politics, liberals are the gas pedal and conservatives are the brakes. And I'm generally with the gas pedal, but not if we're driving off a cliff. On the trans issue, America is no ands, ifs, or buts about it, absolutely alone in the world now, an outlier country. Last month, England's National Health Service announced that there's not enough evidence to support the safety or clinical effectiveness of puberty blockers for third graders.
For years, the woke left have held up Canada as their frosty utopia, a polite, maple-scented version of what they wish America could be. But not everyone buying that sweet fantasy, least of all Bill March. On a fiery episode of Real Time, he didn't just poke holes in the myth, he burned it down like a pile of overdone pancakes. Buckle up, this roast comes extra crispy.
Canada was where every woke white college kid wearing pajama pants outdoors who'd had it up to here with America's racist patriarchy dreamt of living someday. There's only one problem with thinking everything's better in Canada. It's not. Not anymore, anyway. Last year, Canada added 1.3 million people, which is a lot in 1 year, the equivalent of the U.S. adding 11 million migrants in 1 year. And now they're experiencing a housing crisis even worse than ours. And we're sleeping in tents.
Maher doesn't waste a second. He dives headfirst into the woke left maple-flavored fantasy and shatters it like a snow globe in a blender. First, target Canada housing disaster, the offspring of feel-good immigration policies the American left drools over like a Willy Wonka's golden ticket. The cold, hard truth: Canada is staring down a staggering 3.5 million home shortfall by 2030, a crisis so massive it makes California look like a landlord's dream. Already, more than 1 in 5 Canadians are shelling out over 30% of their income just to avoid turning their Teslas into studio apartments. And yet, the woke brigade keeps holding up Canada as some frozen utopia. Maher doesn't just laugh at that fantasy, he torches it like a campfire in a snowstorm.
The median price of a home here is $346,000. In Canada, converted to US dollars, it's $487,000. If Barbie moved to Winnipeg, she wouldn't be able to afford her dream house, and Ken would be working at Tim Hortons.
Housing in Canada isn't just pricey, it's punishing. The average home costs between $500,000 and $540,000, and in cities like Vancouver or Toronto, prices skyrocket past $750,000 to over $1 million faster than you can say mortgage crisis. By comparison, the typical American home sits around $350,000 to $400,000. Suddenly, that so-called northern utopia starts to feel more like an economic ice bath. The woke left loves to sing praises of Canada's brilliant model, but let's be real, many can barely afford their own rent back home. Slap Canadian price tags on US houses, and you're not building a progressive paradise, you're drafting a mass eviction notice. Maher warning hits like a blast of Arctic wind: mimic Canada, and you won't find affordability, just a frozen path to being priced out of your own driveway.
And because of mortgage debt, Canada has the highest debt-to-GDP ratio of any G7 nation. I don't know what that means, but it sounds bad. So does their vaunted healthcare system, which ranks dead last among high-income countries in access to primary healthcare and ability to see a doctor in a day or two. And it's not for lack of spending. Of the 30 countries with universal coverage, Canada spends over 13% of its economy on it, which is a lot of money for free healthcare.
Canada cracks are showing faster than a frozen lake in spring, and the Liberal fan club's snow globe fantasy is melting right along with them. The truth is, the problems up north run far deeper than the maple-scented myth ever admitted. And let's be clear, Bill Maher isn't some MAGA firebrand waving a conservative flag. He's a lifelong liberal, the sharp-tongued skeptic the left once proudly called their own. That's what makes this takedown sting. It's not coming from the opposition, it's coming from inside the house. If Maher the one sounding the alarm on Canada, this isn't just a crack in the illusion, it's a full-blown collapse. But here's the twist: Maher not ranting for applause. He holding up a mirror to America, smirk and all, basically saying, you want to copy this really, because if Canada your model, brace yourself for soaring prices, empty promises, and a front row seat to regret. And the kicker, Maher only just getting started.
Look, I'm not saying Canada still isn't a great country. It is, but those aren't paradise numbers. If Canada was an apartment, the lead feature might be America adjacent. And if America was a rental car, Canada would be America or similar. And again, honestly, Canada, I'm not saying any of this because I enjoy it. I don't, because I've always enjoyed you. But I need to cite you as a cautionary tale to help my country. And the moral of that tale is, yes, you can move too far left. And when you do, you wind up pushing the people in the middle to the right.
Is Bill Maher suddenly confessing to joining the right-wing rebellion? Not exactly. This is what happens when you wander too deep into leftist la-la land eventually. You hit the edge and remember that gravity still applies. When the left veers so far off track that even lifelong liberals start choking on the groupthink, the pendulum doesn't just swing back, it snaps. Not every disillusioned liberal becomes a conservative out of newfound love for the GOP. Some just wake up one day and think, hold on, when did everyone around me lose their minds? Take Joe Rogan, once the poster child of counterculture progressives, now branded right-wing for the crime of asking questions. Or Elon Musk, the man who made electric cars cool and rockets reusable. Hardly a conservative resume, yet somehow cast out to the center-right for not applauding on cue. Maher in that same camp. He hasn't changed, the shoreline has. The left sprinted so far off the cliff that anyone standing still now looks like a Reagan speechwriter by comparison.
At its worst, Canada is what American voters think happens when there's no one putting a check on extreme wokeness. Like the saga of Canadian shop teacher Kayla Lemieux, whose pronouns are she, her, and those. Kayla is now back to being a guy named Kerry, but 2 years ago, when they showed up to teach children, the progressive high school they taught at said that they, the school, not the person. Really, you couldn't have found another word. We were using that one. Anyway, okay. They were committed to a safe environment for gender expression. Safe for who? What about the children?
This is what happens when society collectively decides that reality is optional, and the rest of us are forced to join the improv act. The result: absolute chaos, gender edition. Picture a classroom full of bewildered students trying to keep up with a teacher who changes identities like outfits. Monday, he arrives in a dress, announces he a woman, and expects a standing ovation. Tuesday, he back to being a man as if nothing ever happened. No explanation, no reflection, just confusion and whiplash all around. That not education, that performance art gone off the rails. And not the profound, thought-provoking kind, the kind that leaves everyone wondering whether they missed the plot twist or the medication reminder. When identity turns into a revolving door, clarity checks out. What left isn't progress, it just costume changes dressed up as enlightenment.
That's when things change, but what people say about them doesn't. Yes, for decades, places like Vancouver and Amsterdam and Stockholm seemed idyllic because everything was free and all the energy we needed was produced by riding a bike to your job at the windmill. Canada was where all the treasured goals of liberalism worked perfectly. It was like NPR come to life. But with poutine.
Let's be honest, this circus of extreme wokeness isn't happening in some distant ideological lab. It's unfolding right next door, in the land of maple leaves and mandatory politeness. Canada, the same country America liberals idolize like it the promised land with universal health care and better manners. This is their golden model, their shining northern beacon of progressive perfection. But scrape off that maple syrup glaze, and what underneath sky-high housing costs crushing families, identity politics run wild, classrooms that look more like casting calls, and government policies that read like failed social experiments. Still, the American left gazes north with dreamy eyes, convinced Canada is living out some enlightened fairy tale. It'd be funny if it weren't so tragic, because if this is utopia, it built on debt, dysfunction, and denial. Maher message cuts clean through the sugar coating before liberals rush to photocopy Canada playbook. They might want to check the fine print. Spoiler, not the glossy fantasy brochure they've been handing out.
They say in politics, liberals are the gas pedal and conservatives are the brakes. And I'm generally with the gas pedal, but not if we're driving off a cliff. On the trans issue, America is no ands, ifs, or buts about it, absolutely alone in the world now, an outlier country. Last month, England's National Health Service announced that there's not enough evidence to support the safety or clinical effectiveness of puberty blockers for third graders, and that they were going to stop fumbling around with children's privates, because that's Prince Andrew's job.
Maher's spot on here. Trump didn't just appear out of nowhere. He rose because millions of Americans, including centrists and disillusioned liberals, finally hit their breaking point with the nonstop parade of woke theatrics pouring out of the left. The Democratic National Committee had turned into a full-blown circus, identity politics as the main act, cancel culture as the sideshow, and virtue signaling at the concession stand. And people stopped buying tickets. It wasn't just conservatives rolling their eyes, moderates and independents were walking out, too. Even young voters the crowd Democrats thought they had on lock started tuning out. Turns out, trading free thought for ideological obedience doesn't exactly sell, on campus or anywhere else. The DNC stopped feeling like a movement and started feeling like detention with better hashtags. And when the left forgot how to lead, they didn't just lose the White House, they gift-wrapped it for Donald Trump with a note that basically said, "Our bad."
So too with all the other good place countries, in direct opposition to America's choice to affirm children's wishes on switching gender, no matter the age or psychiatric history. The far left, which always like to use, well, Europe does it. Yeah, no, that doesn't work on this one anymore.
Here the irony: the woke brigade would rather sweep under the rainbow rug. The very countries they idolize as beacons of progress have quietly pumped the brakes on their gender crusade. Sweden, Finland, the UK, the holy trinity of progressive virtue in the left imagination, have all rolled back or restricted medical transitions for minors, citing something truly radical: evidence. Some have even halted such procedures until adulthood, concluding that maybe, just maybe, irreversible medical decisions shouldn't be part of teenage trial and error. These governments did the unthinkable: they reviewed the data, weighed the long-term risks, and chose to protect kids instead of appeasing activists. Meanwhile, America woke elite keep chanting about following the science, even as much of the developed world quietly steps away from the parade. Turns out, the so-called enlightened nations have figured out what the US left refuses to admit: gambling with children's futures isn't progress, it's recklessness dressed up as compassion.
Or on immigration. Sweden opened its borders to over 1.5 million immigrants since 2010, and now 20% of its citizens are foreign-born, and its education system is tanking, and it has Europe's highest rate of gangland killings. And one result is that the far-right parties,
true enough, throwing the borders wide open to anyone with a pulse and a passport stamp isn't compassion. It's chaos dressed up as virtue. And we're living through the fallout. Fentanyl smuggling and addiction have exploded in recent years, turning entire communities into ground zero for one of the deadliest drug crises in history. This isn't about inconvenience, it's about neighborhoods gutted, families torn apart, and a generation disappearing under the weight of chemical carnage. The numbers are staggering, but the heartbreak is worse. Ordinary Americans who once lived in safety are now paying the price for political negligence. The left likes to call this kindness. But what kind of compassion leaves kids overdosing in school bathrooms and parents planning funerals instead of graduation? Maher warning cuts deep. If America can't secure its borders, it can't protect its people. And without security, there's no peace, just disorder with a policy labeled I. In the end, Maher takedown of Canada and the radical left isn't just comedy, it's clarity. From housing meltdowns to gender confusion, border failures to fentanyl devastation, the utopian illusion collapses the moment it meets reality. America doesn't need Canada blueprint. It needs leadership, sanity, and a firm grasp on the real world. And with that, the curtain falls. If this hit home, hit that like button and subscribe for more unapologetic commentary. Thanks for watching, and as Maher would say, we're just getting started.